So what can be done to resolve this deadly political standoff, and what could it mean for Thailand's stability? Joining us now is Dr. Andrew Walker, a Senior Fellow at the College of Asia and the Pacific at the Australian National University. He's worked in Thailand for more than 15 years and he's been watching events over the weekend very closely. Dr. Walker, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
But first, what was your reaction when you realised just how much blood was shed over the weekend?
Well, I was as shocked and as upset as anyone else was. It's obviously a tragic situation, but all too predictable. Trying to move such a large and determined crowd by force was inevitably going to result in some violence.
Well, we've just heard from our correspondent there that protesters have in fact been galvanised by the violence and that they control much of Bangkok there. What do you think can be done to calm the situation?
Well, I think this is the tragedy and the problem for the government. There's been 20 lives lost and many people injured, and the net effect is nothing, or possibly, as your reporter said, it's emboldened the red shirts. I think it's clear that this is going to have to be resolved by some negotiation. Force is not going to work, and I think it's likely that the government will have to agree to an election sooner rather than later.
Well, there is talk of early elections, but hasn't the Prime Minister flagged that before?
Well, he earlier flagged an election for the end of the year, for December. How genuine that offer was is not clear, but it was certainly rejected by the red shirts. They want an election very soon, within weeks or a very small number of months. Obviously, the reasonable situation is going to have to be some sort of compromise. My feeling is perhaps around July or August there could be an election. But there's also constitutional problems. We're working under a constitution that's got provisions in it that could easily undo the results of another election. So it's a bit hard to see how things could proceed before some of those constitutional issues are addressed.
And if the Prime Minister resigns and calls elections as the red shirts demand, won't that simply bring the yellow shirts back onto the streets?
It may, if a pro-Thaksin party wins an upcoming election, which certainly seems possible. It may then bring the yellow shirts back. My feeling is that the yellow shirts probably have a significantly smaller base of popular support than the red shirts. But it does raise the issue that elections without some national consensus of accepting the result of an election might not necessarily solve the problem.
What about the King? How much power does he have in all this?
Well, I think at the moment, in practical terms, the King is very old and he's very unwell, so any action on the part of the King is very unlikely. Of course, he's got symbolic power, but over the past few years, that symbolic power has been pretty much mobilised on the anti-Thaksin, the yellow shirt side of politics. So I think it's unlikely that the palace will be able to play any mediating role in the current crisis.
Are you saying that the King, the red shirts, would not actually accept the authority of the King anymore?
Well, I think they've made some rhetorical calls for him to intervene, but I think they know that they don't really have friends in the palace.
What is the danger for Thailand if the government can't bring this under control?